As the Earth turns and the seasons change, winter grips the planet. Of all the elements, cold is our deadliest enemy. From ice storms to avalanches, frostbite to heart attacks, cold is a killer.
Climbing.
I'm Donald McIntyre. I'm about to follow winter's relentless advance from its home in the Arctic as it brings some of the most dangerous weather on the planet. I'm about to be buried alive, frozen solid, and plunged into the lethal white heart of winter. This is Wild Weather. My journey with cold starts here, on the very top of the world. The Arctic has claimed hundreds of lives as explorers battled the extreme elements to get here. But I've chosen a quicker way. Amazingly, this beautiful and awesome landscape is the source of all our cold weather in the Northern Hemisphere. I've come here to find out how winter begins. The Arctic is the area north of 66 degrees latitude. Frozen all the year round, it's an area of harsh scenery and frozen beauty. This is the world's largest ice cube. The scale of this place is breathtaking. 16 million square kilometers of solid ice. That's bigger than India and China put together. What is strange is that there's very little weather to speak of. I expected blizzards and blinding snowstorms. It's sunny. There's a light breeze and very little snowfall. It's just like a desert, and in fact, it's classed as one, but a desert that's permanently frozen. To find out how this place generates our winter weather, we have to know what keeps it in this state. We think of Earth as a blue planet, but look at it from above and it's white. Frozen solid all year round. That's because the planet is tilted on its axis. During our winter, the Arctic is turned away from the sun. It's always night, and the temperature can plummet as low as -50. Winter shrouds the Northern Hemisphere. As the year passes, the Earth continues its orbit, and the North Pole tilts towards the sun. The seasons change, and summer returns to the north. Up here, the sun shines pretty much 24 hours a day, which is why it's called the land of the midnight sun. But even this is not enough to break cold's grip. In the Arctic, as you can see from my shadow, the angle of the sun is so shallow that its rays simply bounce off the surface, reflecting its energy rather than absorbing it. This keeps the temperature of the surrounding atmosphere constant and helps perpetuate the polar climate. Even at the height of the Arctic summer, temperatures only creep above freezing. But it's still not enough to melt the ice. Which is just as well because I'm not standing on solid rock. A few meters beneath my feet is the Arctic Ocean. And just to prove it, I'm going to take a look. because this vast layer of ice holds the key to cold's grip on the poles. It's spectacular, a layer of ice up to 10 meters thick, and it's all frozen fresh water. There's about as much salt in it as your own home freezer, because when seawater freezes, it locks out the salt. And it's this vast freshwater ice sheet above me that's the key to winter's energy. It works like this. The ice keeps the air immediately above it at almost the same temperature. Above this layer, warmer air is also sinking down, which forces the colder surface air to slip south. This shimmering air looks just like a heat haze, but is in fact the first wisps of the polar wind. This is what carries winter out of its Arctic lair. This icy blast accelerates the further south it travels. I'm going to follow the polar wind as it brings the wildest, most destructive weather into our world. This far north, east and west have little or no bearing. From here, all directions point south, which I suppose leaves me, as it does winter, only one way to go. Even 1,000 miles south of the North Pole, cold still grips the planet. And yet even here, faced with the worst extremes of cold weather, people make their homes. I've come to one of the most northerly inhabited settlements on the planet, Ittikortimit in Greenland. It's home to one of the most hardy peoples on Earth, the Inuit. So if they can survive out here, maybe they're different from me.
Hi, hi.
Great to be here.
Yes, nice to meet you.
The weather here is among the most extreme on the planet. In winter, temperatures can drop to -40. Children can only play outside for 10 minutes before their skin freezes solid. But a lifetime's exposure can prepare you for the worst. How do you survive out here? You know, I've got 3 pairs of gloves under here and mitts. My fingers are still cold. How can you keep so warm?
When I was young, I also freeze and begin to hunt. I freeze very much, but I learned to use my hands even when they're very cold. It's training.
So the Inuit are no different from me. We are simply not designed for cold because we evolved in the tropics. And even after thousands of years of Arctic weather, the Inuit have remarkably few physical adaptations to the cold. It's only our inventiveness, not evolution, that keeps us alive. Clothing, shelter, heating. Only a madman would challenge the Arctic cold without any kind of protection. So in order to see what it does to me, I've come here to a controlled environment to find out just what happens when the body is exposed to extreme cold.
Not the best place to be in your underwear, is it?
According to cold expert Dr. Frank Golden, most people can only stand this kind of cold for half an hour. I'll be constantly monitored, and unlike the real Arctic, I can walk out of here anytime.
Okay.
Good luck to you, mate.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Temperature here is -18. It's bloody freezing. It's not the best place to be without any clothes on, but at least it's getting my temperature down quickly for my body to react.
Our bodies keep our vital organs at a stable 37 degrees Celsius. It's called the core temperature. I'm going to have to work overtime to try and maintain it.
He's not long in the cold now, but you can see he's beginning to shiver a little. Well, he's shivering to try and produce more heat, to try and counter the heat being lost in the environment. Notice the way he keeps his arms and his elbows close to his side and his arms across his chest. He's trying to shut down the surface area through which heat is being lost in the surrounding environment.
Any way to try and keep warm is just to try and move.
He's not sure what to do with his body, you see, but he knows he can't generate enough heat by shivering alone, so he's not sure whether he should exercise harder and try and produce more heat from that. His temperature's just falling, there's nothing he can do about it.
After a very short time, my body simply can't generate enough heat and my temperature is on the way down. My core temperature has fallen 2 degrees, which means I'm now hypothermic. My muscles are stiffening and my brain is cooling. If I lose my wits, I'll have no chance. Even shivering stops as the muscles slow down. And now, a little test.
Can you count down from 100, taking a 7 away at each time? 100 minus 7?
100 minus 7, okay. 100 minus 7, 93.
Minus 7.
86. 86. I feel like I got the flu. I got a headache.
As all the vital organs start to cool, the whole body starts to shut down. This is the critical stage.
Then he would actually get he'd become tired and he'd just like to go to sleep. But he has to survive, he'd have to fight through that phase and keep determined to keep alive, keep going. But eventually, it doesn't matter how determined he is, the conditions will overcome him and his temperature will fall down below a level where he can keep consciousness. And eventually he'd die.
If my body temperature drops by 6 degrees, I lose consciousness, and death is inevitable.
He's in pain now.
Oh, God. I don't want to be here.
Time has come actually to pull him out now. He's had enough. Right, come on, Donald, you've had enough, mate. How are you feeling? God, you're bitterly cold, aren't you? You're shivering a lot. Your muscles stiff.
My toes feels going to fall off.
Your muscles have really gone stiff. You can hardly talk.
Oh, God.
Come on, let's get you warmed up. Put him on, come out and check you out.
Ooh.
In the real world, we need our brains to survive. So if I can't last 40 minutes in minus 18, how am I going to survive out here at minus 30? Eric Bruin and Mads Vidal must know. They have the most extreme tour of duty in the world. For 3 months at a time, the Danish Sirius Patrol travel the icy wastelands of northeastern Greenland with only their training and a dog sled for protection. And for the next 24 hours, I'm going to join them to find out how they survive in nature's freezer.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Donald.
Eric.
Eric, hi.
My partner, Mads.
Mads, hi.
Welcome to Greenland.
So these are your dogs. They're wonderful.
Yes.
Oh, beautiful. They're gorgeous. They don't bite.
No, they're very friendly.
It's time to go.
Wunderbar.
Hunt! Didn't work that time, did it?
Yeah.
That's all right, all right.
Oh, dog.
Okay. So that's how you start. That's how you learn. Good idea to learn to ski first before you become a member of the Sirius Patrol. Let's go.
Yeah.
It was the weather that first brought them here. In the Second World War, the Danish had to defend Greenland from the Germans. Because if you know the weather here, you can predict the weather in Europe. Today, the biggest threat to their patch is from the seals. And of course, amateurs like me. But still, highly trained professionals like Eric, Mads and me are vigilant. Out here, Blizzards and snowstorms can strike without warning, and the cold is a constant threat. Temperatures regularly fall below -40.
Oh! The thing about being out in the cold is that absolutely everything freezes, including, in this case, my left eyelid. And what the guys have told me is that if your eyelid freezes like that, close, put your hand to warm it up, and then it melts, and then you can open your eye. A bit dangerous to try and pull it open, so I'm just going to try it. Now I can feel it melting. That's a good thing. Now, I can truly say that I feel as cold as I probably look. Now that's fine. It just shows you just got to be careful. The cold's a killer. What do you know?
As night falls, the temperature plummets. There's only one tent, so what happens to me? I'm about to be buried alive. Digging a hole deep into the snow can offer life-saving shelter, or so I'm told.
So, what do we have to do?
Now we start making an engine.
Yeah.
And we dig in and we make as long as you are in that direction.
Okay,
so
kind of ledge, okay.
You will lay about here. So now we dig in and start.
Okay.
And it's just much harder.
Yeah.
You take it, just throw it away.
So that's my home.
Yes, you're at home.
Excellent.
Try going.
I can look forward to the night alone as the temperature drops below -30. I have to say, I'm a bit apprehensive about being buried alive out here. All I'll have to help me survive is a sleeping bag and some candles.
It's about 1.5 meters high, about 2.5 meters long, and about 1.5 meters wide. My entrance is in there. There's always a gap for oxygen to come through. An emergency link with the Sirius patrol if anything goes wrong, if this starts to cave in, but it shouldn't do because it's pretty well built. Hi guys, it's Donal here. Just to say no worries and see you in the morning. Over. Okay. See if they respond. If not, well, I just hope they'd be listening if something did go wrong. Okay. It's the middle of the night here, and it's about -30 outside. Of course, there's one big problem here in the Arctic, and that is any bit of exposed skin is liable to get frostbite after a few minutes, which brings me to the problem of going to the toilet. Don't think so.
Amazingly, the temperature inside the hole stayed 25 degrees warmer than outside. The snow works as a surprisingly good insulator. So I spent the night in what, for the Arctic, was a cozy -5 degrees.
Morning, Donald.
Morning, guys.
How you been?
Good. Good.
You want to go have a cup of coffee?
That's a great idea.
The Sirius Patrol are trained to cope with the severe Arctic weather. But when it hits the places we least expect it, the consequences can be horrific. This isn't Greenland. This is New York State in early spring 1993.
4 feet from us, our tracks were gone. You couldn't even find where we just came from. We were just gone. wind blew us down, and our eyelids froze to our face. I mean, you couldn't see. It just, you had to hold your hands up here so it wouldn't sting you.
The 12th of March, 1993, saw the entire east coast of the US gripped by one of the wildest winter storms in history.
Here's the latest satellite showing a huge storm system coming up the coast. Tremendous amount of moisture colliding with the cold air means very heavy snows for our region. I'm still going 12 to 24 inches for the capital region by midday tomorrow.
In upstate New York, Jeff Smock and Bill Simmons were relaxing after work. Several hundred miles away, the storm was growing and heading their way. Outside, it started to snow, but that wasn't unusual for the time of year. As they set off home, they had no idea that they were about to be overtaken by a blizzard that would change their lives forever.
Full-blown blizzard conditions are over the Capital District and western New England. We're talking about thunder snows, high winds, and dangerous cold.
The snowfall was extraordinary. Bill and Jeff ground to a halt just half a mile from home. They decided to walk the last leg, and that's when their nightmare began.
You couldn't go forward, you couldn't go backwards, you couldn't go right or left. There was no place you could go.
It was like plowing through 5 foot of snow, and then you get to a certain point and you're exhausted, and we'd look up and the snowbanks are up here. It's like you're in a hole. Our original thought was we stay at the tree for, a few minutes, an hour, whatever it took for the wind to calm down, and then start heading back home. But lo and behold, the weather just kept getting worse, worse, and worse.
By now, the winds were gusting at 145 miles per hour. Temperatures had plummeted way below zero, and the snow was drifting as high as 10 meters. All over the state, the blizzard was tightening its grip.
The death toll from the blizzard of '93 is mounting now. 7 people reported dead.
Make no mistake about it, this is an emergency.
Back at the tree, the storm was getting worse. Jeff and Bill had been stuck here for 8 hours.
Well, I couldn't even walk. I made it maybe about 10 feet from the tree, and my feet just gave out. I couldn't even stand up anymore. I tried to stand up, couldn't. I had to crawl back here.
That's when I said, Bill, I says, no one's looking for us.
Nobody knows we're here.
Right.
They were trapped. As the night wore on, the temperature fell even lower, hitting Arctic extremes of -40 degrees, and still the storm raged around them. By the time morning came, Bill and Jeff had spent 18 hours exposed to Arctic conditions. Amazingly, they were still alive. Jeff managed to struggle through the snow and raise the alarm. It was another 6 hours before the rescue services could get to Bill. But the cold had left a devastating legacy. During their hours of exposure, they both suffered winter's vicious touch.
I ended up tucking my head in my shirt, and it pulled up the back of my clothes and exposed the back and the top part of my buttocks, and got severe frostbite. There's no feeling, and the nerves are gone, and there's scar tissue, and they did skin grafts off the back of my leg twice, 2 surgeries.
My feet, my hands, my butt, my knees had gotten it in spots. The calves of my legs had it in spots because the way I was sitting on the ground. My hands were blistered right up, and they were as huge as softballs.
Deep frostbite is a one-way process. The cold literally freezes the skin tissue. Ice forms in the fluid in and around the cells. The tiny blood vessels freeze solid and no oxygen is delivered. But worse is to come. With no blood supply, the cells can't fight infection. Gangrene sets in and the affected area becomes black and starts to decompose. At this stage, there's no option left but to amputate. After his ordeal in the freezing cold, both Jeff's feet were severely frostbitten.
In the end, I ended up getting skin grafts done on my hands, on my butt, my legs, but I lost both of my feet from about 4 inches above the ankles, both of them.
A wild weather event like this is rare, unexpected, which is why the cost is so high. The key to survival is to be prepared. But even the professionals can get caught out. In the last 50 years, the Sirius Patrol have lost 6 men under the ice. Severe frostbite is always a problem, but they know the risks. and their love of this awesome landscape far outweighs the dangers.
Today, as the Sirius Patrol travel north into this wonderful wilderness, I'm on a different journey, traveling south with the cold as it brings winter to the peoples of the Northern Hemisphere.
I'm going to a place that gets the first blast of winter's icy grip. All that polar wind screaming south is about to crash into the warmer air from the equator. When they meet, all hell breaks loose. And the place right on the front line is the Mount Washington Weather Station in Northeast America. It's here that the battle between hot and cold begins. But for now, at least, all is quiet.
Mount Washington is the highest point in the northeastern United States. Although not all that high on a world scale, it's commonly known as the home of the world's worst weather.
On the summit this morning, the temperature outside is down to -9 degrees. Winds are currently out of the northwest at 48 miles per hour. The forecast for the summit
today will be in the clouds this morning with snow showers.
And winds will be out of the west, 40 to 60 miles per hour. But don't hold your breath because yet another system will be approaching from the Great Lakes this afternoon.
So how does a sun-kissed mountain like this get such a bad reputation? Well, the summit lies in the path of the principal storm tracks and air mass routes that affect the weather in the northeast, which makes it the perfect place to discover what happens when wind and cold combine.
Well, good morning. Welcome to the summit of Mount Washington, the home of the world's worst weather.
Great to be here, Charlie. I have to say the mountain's been very good to us today.
I'll tell you should have been here yesterday.
Just my luck. I came here to find the worst winds in the world, and the weather was perfect. But I didn't have to wait long. A few hours later, I saw why this place gets its reputation. Within minutes, the blue skies turned to grey and the winds kicked up. The highest wind ever recorded was here at Mount Washington, a staggering 231 miles an hour. The wind now is gusting at 60 miles an hour, and already I'm getting tossed about. It's very difficult to stay up. The first thing you notice when the wind gets going is that it feels much colder. This effect is called the wind chill factor. So in winds of 50 miles per hour, -5 feels like -38. Wind and cold together multiply the deadly effects of winter, which is why the Mount Washington Observatory is the best place to study the extremes of winter weather. That is, if the instruments don't ice up. When the wind and a cold fog like this meet an object, something truly amazing happens. The fog that surrounds me is made up of billions of water droplets. The strange thing is that they're all way below the freezing point, but remain in liquid form called supercooled. But when they hit an object, they freeze solid. These beautiful feathers of ice are called rime ice. It's as tough as nails. This remarkable ability of water to remain a liquid way below zero is the cause of one of the most extraordinary weather events on the planet, an ice storm. And one of the worst ice storms in history hit eastern Canada with a vengeance.
This was clearly the most destructive, disruptive storm in Canadian history. We have over a century and a half of weather keeping in Canada, and there was nothing to match this.
Ice storms are not unusual in Canada, coating the landscape with a beautiful shroud of ice. But in January 1998, Canada was hit by a storm that was anything but usual. At first, the ice storm of '98 was just as magical.
It was really more of an exhilaration. People were not too disrupted by that. School was canceled, you had businesses closed, but it was a winter wonderland. It gives you that enchanted wonderland. It looks, the landscape looks so beautiful.
On the evening of the 4th of January, winter was still on the attack. A bank of freezing polar air sat like a blanket over the northeast of the country. At the same time, a mass of warm, moist air from Texas moved in above the polar air, forming a wedge and trapping it beneath. Perfect conditions for an ice storm. But in the middle of the wedge, rain from the warm air above doesn't have enough time to freeze solid on its way down, so it falls as supercooled rain.
What happens is that the raindrop will fall through that wedge of cold air, and the liquid rain droplet will begin to cool, but it doesn't get quite frozen. It freezes to the point that it's what we call supercooled. It actually is below freezing. It falls below the freezing point, but it's still liquid. And because the object that it hits is below freezing, it's almost shocked. It makes that perfect transformation from the liquid to the solid. It spreads out and freezes into a little veneer of ice, and which is the toughest and most adhesive ice that nature can produce.
Ice storms can be lethal, but usually the misery only lasts a few hours. But the ice storm of January 1998 was different. It arrived in waves. For 2 days, the freezing rain just kept coming.
And this ice just kept building up and getting thicker and thicker and thicker, and the wires kept getting bigger and bigger, and all of the trees around, of course, were building up with ice.
Look at the thickness of this ice compared to my hand. It's quite amazing.
You could have maybe 4 inches of ice around a small twig. And of course, that twig is part of a branch, which is also encased in ice, will all of a sudden have a totally different weight, and it will finally break and fall to the ground.
This condition kept up for hour after hour after hour, and then gradually, that's when we started to hear the trees coming down, and then the lines started coming down. Trees were falling on the lines, and the lines were falling down on their own because of the weight of the ice that was building up on there.
By the evening of the 3rd day, the rain stopped, but the icy conditions continued. Then satellites monitoring the storm saw another wave hit. Thousands of square miles came to a virtual standstill. Life was almost impossible.
The freezing rain won't let up.
If you do not have to go out, do not, unless it is absolutely necessary.
On the Friday, what we call the dark Friday or the cold Friday, that we suddenly realized that this was more than a usual ice storm. Then we lost power for more than half of the province.
The lines of cables and huge transmission towers, they were crumpled to the ground like paper clips.
When you saw electrical pylon suddenly buckle in front of your eyes, you knew right away this was going to be major problems.
If you can imagine, as you're looking down this whole pile of poles, and you see them coming down one after another, and you see the fireballs as the electricity is being cut off as well. They look like a war zone, really. It was so devastated.
The ice struck at the very heart of modern life. Every house, factory and office in an area of 500,000 square miles was blacked out. Without power and communications, Montreal hit crisis point. A centre was set up to coordinate emergency efforts.
An ice storm that's been called the worst weather crisis Eastern Canada has ever had to deal with.
Without electricity, millions had no heating, fresh water or sanitation. The situation was fast getting out of control. Emergency services couldn't cope, and the government was at a loss about what to do next.
We could see desperation in the eyes of some people.
Temperatures plummeted to -15, -18.
Even after the ice storm passed, it took 3 weeks to restore power and get the city back to normal.
For 4 million people, this ice storm was the weather event of their lifetime. They never, in fact, will probably have ever endured such an event.
In the end, 50,000 people were forced to leave their homes and take refuge in temporary shelters. 35 people died, and many more were left in a critical condition. During the storm, 3,000 kilometers of power lines were destroyed at a cost of over $800 million.
200 years ago, it wouldn't have been a storm. 200 years ago, the ice would have come and the ice would have gone, and the people would have still had wood in their stove fires and making their muffins on the stove, and it wouldn't bother them. But everything today is depending on electricity, and so it was very devastating.
In our endless battle against the cold, the weather won, and our technology was useless. As my journey with winter continues south, cold weather becomes far less extreme, but can be even more dangerous. To prove it, I'm off to the cold death capital of Europe. Moscow? Helsinki? No. London.
Just because you can't see the ice and the snow doesn't mean that cold isn't a killer. In Britain, we very rarely experience the extremes that winter can bring, like ice storms and blizzards. So it may be surprising to learn that there are more cold-related deaths in London than anywhere else in Europe.
In the mild climate we enjoy in Britain, we don't feel we need to dress up warmly against the cold. But even these temperatures can be deadly.
Even in water well above freezing, say 10 degrees Celsius, that's 50 Fahrenheit, some 1 in 6 will be dead after just 15 minutes. Now, it's a cold morning and the water in this lake is near 5 degrees. Now, sorry, I forgot that line. The water in this lake is near 5 degrees. Even a quick dip, even a quick dip, as this heart rate monitor should show, should be enough to send my body's defenses into overdrive.
My body's progress is being monitored by Dr. Rosemary Leonard.
Quick, here, put the towel around you. You're shivering like crazy. How do you feel? Let's just see what's happened to your pulse and your blood pressure.
The monitor showed my pulse was 50% faster than my normal heart rate. Now for my blood pressure.
160, that's high.
So what does that
160 over 100.
What's that reading telling you?
What's happening is that the blood vessels in the outer part of your skin and to some extent inside your body are narrowing down to try and conserve the heat and try and conserve the blood flow where it's really needed, around your heart and your lungs.
This is the normal response. As the blood vessels in my skin constrict, the blood in the rest of my body becomes thicker and stickier. And it's this everyday reaction to cold that can sometimes cause a sudden and painful death. It's a story that repeats itself every day across the city. A cold winter's morning. A commuter hurries to the station. The rush hour has begun. It could be you.
Is it cold this morning, isn't it?
No hat, no scarf, no gloves. So what? It's cold, but it's not snowing. As you wait for the train, your body is already shutting down the blood vessels nearest to the exposed skin. As you shiver, your blood is starting to thicken and retreat back to your vital organs. As it gets thicker and stickier, the nightmare scenario begins. A tiny clot starts to form. As you worry about being late, the clot is on time to reach your heart. That night, you suffer a lethal heart attack and never make that journey again. The coroner's report adds you to the statistics. Death by natural causes. The figures show that in London, over 3,000 extra deaths happen like this every winter. Across the UK, the figure is closer to 20,000. All victims of an invisible serial killer, cold. But the real tragedy is that it could so easily have been avoided. My mother was right. All you need is a hat and gloves. Further south than London, winter's grip is even less extreme. Unless, of course, you go up high, where cold is always with us. On the top of the mountains, or high in the clouds, there is always snow, even at the equator.
Wherever you are in the world, there's a good chance that there'll be snow above you. Most of the time, it falls as rain. But up here, at high altitude, it falls as snow.
It's one of nature's miracles and winter's most distinctive hallmarks. Snowflakes start life as tiny particles in the clouds. Water droplets are attracted to their surfaces and freeze, forming ice crystals. More and more water droplets are drawn to the crystal, which grows into a snowflake, eventually getting heavy enough to fall to the ground. The classic six-sided snowflake is the most common, but it's only one of several different types. This is a plate. And here, two plates are joined by a column. They can combine to form even more complex shapes as they fall. Needles, columns, and plates form the basic building blocks. Under the electron microscope, extreme close-ups of snowflakes reveal their almost unbelievable complexity. The weather's miracle of engineering. Each different type of snowflake forms a different type of snow, all with extraordinary properties. Some can be as strong as concrete, which is just as well if you're caught in a storm with Peter Marchand. Peter is a snow lover, a winter scientist who spends weeks researching out in the snowy hills of Colorado. He needs nothing out here except a few feet of loose snow.
Ever since my father got me out on skis as a small child, I became interested in snow as a material.
When snowflakes fall to the ground, they don't remain soft and powdery, but under their own weight, bond together into a solid mass. It's this bonding process that allows nature to make these wonderful snow sculptures. But it's also what allows Peter Marchand to build himself a shelter.
What I'm doing now is building a snow house. It's called a quinzhee.
The process is almost magical. Just piling up loose, powdery snow puts pressure on the surface of the snowflake. It melts, forming a thin layer of water which sticks the neighboring crystals together. Over time, the water freezes, bonding the snowflakes together.
There. We'll give it a couple of hours to complete the process of bonding, and we'll come back and start digging it out and have ourselves a pretty nice shelter for the night.
A few hours later, the pile of loose snow has turned into a solid block that Peter simply hollows out to form a sturdy shelter against the wildest winter weather.
It's a very strong structure. It seems to get stronger with time and can be used over and over again. You can move on and come back to them. It's just really a beautiful material, free of charge. For as easy as they are to build, they're just as easy to walk away from. You have nothing to fold up, to put on your back or on your pack animals and carry with you.
Mark Twain said of the cold here in North America, if the thermometer had been an inch longer, we'd all have been frozen to death. And although we sometimes complain about the cold, winter also has its pleasures.
The same bonding effect that built Peter's snow shelter is the same effect that makes the perfect surface for winter sports. But when that bonding fails, the results can be terrifying.
Look to the left, saw a big crack. Look to the right, saw a big crack. Oh, I'm in an avalanche.
Whilst filming a TV programme, expert skier Nick Farquhar was caught in one of Cole's most powerful and frightening killers.
Came up for one breath, and got engulfed again, and then hitting the snow at the bottom, and the rest of the avalanche pounding me down like a hammer. Poof, 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 poof.
He was lucky to survive, but each year many hundreds don't. Snowfalls usually build up into strongly bonded layers, but sometimes one layer remains weak. Even the vibrations from a skier can cause the layer above to slide off. Within seconds, hundreds of thousands of tons of snow hurtle down the mountainside at speeds of over 100 miles per hour. With so many people visiting ski resorts each year, avalanches are a real threat. So dedicated teams of avalanchers are locked into a constant battle against the weather. Their job is to seek out potentially dangerous buildups and overhangs of snow and dynamite them. But sometimes the unpredictability of the weather can catch us all by surprise. The little town of Galtour should have been safe from the threat of avalanches, but a freak combination of weather systems made it the victim of one of the deadliest in the Alps for years. It had been snowing heavily for several days, and deep snow was piling up on the mountain above Galtour. In addition, high winds changed direction and began to lift more snow on top of it. But what no one knew was that underneath this huge mass of new snow was an unstable layer. A few days of warm weather had previously melted the surface, which had turned to ice. The new snowfall couldn't bond properly to this hard, icy layer. No one knows exactly what triggered it, but in seconds, over 1/3 tons of snow tore down the mountain at a devastating 186 miles per hour. This monster wiped out everything in its path, and the town of Galtour was crushed under its weight. "38 people died. It was the worst disaster for 30 years. Up here in the mountains, the weather has one more trick up its sleeve. The snow that brings the devastation of avalanches also creates cold's most enduring monument, a glacier.
So, well done. As you can see, we've got to go along the white ice here and then up into the green ice up over here on the glacier. So we've got a long way to go still.
Mountain guide Russell Bryce is going to take me to the source of the Argentière, one of the most impressive glaciers in the Alps. in order to understand how it forms and what it does to the weather, we have to climb it. Down here at the base, it seemed like a good idea. The glacier has been here for over 10,000 years, and it takes the ice 500 years to travel from the top to down here. Way above us lies the source of this great stream of ice, and surprisingly, it starts its life as snow. Over time, the crystals bond together to form the ice. As it falls year after year, the layers of snow become crushed into little ice crystals that fuse together. The weight of new snow compresses the ice below even more, eventually turning it to pure blue glacial ice. When the glacier is big enough, it starts to move, and over thousands of years, a vast river of ice is formed. As it flows, it breaks into enormous crevices. The glacier is over 6 miles long and 2 miles wide.
It's amazing in here, huh?
Yeah.
It's going to be quite hard to get out, though. Look how hard this ice is.
Extraordinary.
It will shatter. You see how it's cracked all around here and border plated.
How do you get a grip on that?
Well, that's what we're going to have to do.
So what is it that makes this extraordinary thing? It's so smooth and with all these various layers?
Well, it's the sheer weight of the ice on top of itself. And if you take a handful of snow like this and you squeeze it and squeeze it and squeeze it, if you squeeze that up really, really hard, you'll make it ice.
The amount of pressure that's created that.
Yeah.
The amount of pressure. How are we going to climb that now?
Quite hard ice here at the moment. It'd be quite delicate, really, isn't it?
Climbing! A little bit of slack.
Got it.
A little bit of slack.
Yeah, that's good.
Just seems impossible to get a grip.
Yeah.
Keep me tight.
You can get your sacks in there.
Ah!
Okay? How you doing?
All right.
Nice. Just to the left there.
Yeah.
Can you just...
Oh, what a relief.
Yeah. Excellent.
Not very graceful.
It's good.
For every 100 meters we climb, the temperature drops by half a degree. It's the mix between the cold air up here and the warm air blown up into the mountains from below that can make the weather so ferocious. But it's also what creates the snow, which makes the glacier. Finally, the peak of the mountain. This is where it all begins.
Here we are, the old Holy Grail. You can see the neve in here.
Yeah.
This is the collection area, you know. This is what actually collects all the ice and snow.
This is where a glacier would absolutely start. This is truly one of the most spectacular and beautiful sights I've seen in all my work in this program, all in the interest of science. It also is one of the coldest and one of the most terrifying sights. Just to see those crevasses down there, how big and how deep are they?
Those ones down there, maybe 50 meters deep.
50 meters deep. If somebody fell in there, you haven't a chance.
You die. Yeah, for sure.
Just a staggering landscape.
But this wonderful landscape is changing. Across the whole Alps, almost half the ice has melted, and 100 glaciers have disappeared altogether. And all this in the last 150 years. Why? Global warming. And if it continues, by the year 2050, ice cover will be just 20% of what it was a century and a half ago. All across the world, this story is the same. From the Andes to the Himalayas, glaciers are on the retreat, melting faster than the snows can replenish them. But the real problem is here at the poles. If the ice north and south, including the glaciers, all melted, the sea level would rise by 20 feet, submerging low-lying cities like London, New York and Tokyo. The irony is that cold, our greatest enemy, is also preserving the world as we know it. Back up north in winter's lair, my journey is at an end. I've learned to respect nature's most powerful weapon. I've seen the devastation cold brings in all its forms: ice, snow, and freezing rain. And I've seen how powerless we are against it.
Like all weather, winter and the cold that it brings is uncontrollable and unpredictable. We must learn to live with it and prepare for the very worst it has to offer. I, for one, will never take cold for granted again.
In the next program, I'm going to follow the violent journey he takes from the steaming jungles of the equator through the blinding heat of the deserts and on into an uncertain future. Our world is warming up and our weather is getting wilder. I'm going to try and find out what the future holds.
Oh my God.